there is a reason we are afraid of the dark. It's an instinct passed down from our ancestors, a survival mechanism screaming at us that we are no longer at the top of the food chain. Because when the sun goes down, the things that hide in the deep woods, the things that crawl out of the ancient earth, they come looking for us. Tonight, you will hear what happens when a trained marksman realizes his gun isn't enough. When a walk through the neighborhood turns into a fight for survival. When the thing outside your house decides to climb onto the roof. Hello everyone, and welcome back to True Haunting Log. Tonight, we have 3 feature-length accounts of pure, unadulterated terror sent in by our viewers. These stories remind us that isolation isn't just a physical state, it's a vulnerability. Find a safe place. Lock your doors. And if you want to support the channel, please hit that like button. And remember, if you have a story that haunts you, send it to truehauntinglog@gmail.com. Now, let's begin. Story 1, Field Stalker, submitted by Daniel. What happened that day will haunt me until the day I die. For some background info, I'm a skilled marksman. I've won a lot of shooting competitions. I'm 27 years old, and I'm not your everyday night owl. Sometimes I find myself staying awake for 3 days at a time, fueled by coffee and the sheer adrenaline of the wild. I live in Fairbanks, Alaska, and hunting is my way of life. Wolves, bears, deer, you name it. If it walks on 4 legs in the tundra, I know how to track it, and I know how to put it down. 2 months back, a wealthier guy who owns a massive private lot of land hired me to guard his property sometimes. He knew of my experience hunting and shooting. The salary he offered was more than what I deserved, frankly, but I took the job anyway. The money was too good to pass up, and because of that, I was able to buy a bunch of new gear. I bought an M21 rifle with a bipod and a military-grade thermal scope, a 1911 .45 handgun for close quarters, some night vision goggles, a couple boxes of 7.62 and .45 ammo, and a heavy-duty tactical flashlight. I felt invincible. I felt like the apex predator. I was wrong. This property I sometimes guard is surrounded by high fences, but it's vast. I feel so isolated out there, as I rarely see people when I'm on duty. Just the trees, the wind, and the biting cold. I sleep in a small, reinforced outpost. Beside the outpost is a wooden watchtower, about 30 feet high, where I spend my time every night overlooking the main field. It was the 5th of March when this happened. The air was so cold it burned my lungs, and the snow was packed hard like concrete. It was just another night in the office. At least, that's what I thought. Around 1:00 in the morning, I was up in the tower, just chilling, nursing a thermos of black coffee. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise that echoed throughout the field. It wasn't a howl, and it wasn't a roar. It was a wet, clicking sound, like bones snapping back into place, followed by a low, vibrating hum that rattled the wood of the tower. I'm not going to lie, it caught me off guard so much so that I almost fell off of my chair. What the heck was that? I whispered to myself, the condensation of my breath pluming in the air. I quickly grabbed my M21 rifle, slammed the bipod onto the railing, and searched for where the noise came from. I scanned the tree line first, then the open field. It took me a moment to find where the noise was coming from, the shadows playing tricks on my eyes. But when I finally found it, my God. About 50 yards away, a freaking humanoid-shaped thing was crawling out of the brush. It was on all 4 limbs, moving with a jerky, disjointed rhythm, like a spider with too few legs. Through the scope, I saw it had gray, leathery skin stretched tight over a skeletal frame. And its eyes, they were a luminescent, glowing red, not reflecting light, emitting it. I could see its mouth opened, jaw unhinged unnaturally wide, revealing rotting, jagged teeth. I had no earthly idea what I was looking at. Just seeing this thing scared the living hell out of me, and I thought it couldn't get worse, but I was wrong. The thing locked those red eyes on the tower. It knew I was there. It began crawling in my direction. My brain was screaming at me to shoot it, to pull the trigger, to blow it away. But my body wouldn't respond. I was frozen in fear. The thing was getting closer and closer, its movements impossibly fast for its awkward shape. 40 yards, 30 yards, 20 yards. The smell hit me, then a wave of ozone and rotting meat that made my eyes water. I finally snapped out of it. My training kicked in. I aimed my rifle at the thing, settling the crosshairs dead center. I looked through the scope, and I saw its face clearly as it entered the moonlight. It looked like a human face, but it was horrifyingly distorted. The eyes were sunken deep into the skull, and the skin was pulled so tight I could see the ridges of the bone beneath. And it was smiling at me. A sick, twisted, impossible smile that stretched past where its cheeks should be. I steadied my breathing. I pulled the trigger. Bang. The recoil punched my shoulder. I hit it right in the shoulder joint. The kinetic energy of a 7.62 round should have blown the limb clean off. Instead, the thing let out a screech that sounded like a mix between a human screaming in a fire and a wild animal caught in a trap. Ah! It fell to the ground, thrashing around in the snow, dark fluid spraying from the wound. I didn't hesitate. I chambered another round, the action smooth and loud in the night air. I aimed for the glowing red eyes. Bang. This time, I hit it square in the head. It jerked violently once, and then it stopped moving. I sat there for a moment, breathing heavily. My heart was pounding out of my chest, echoing in my ears. I kept my rifle trained on the body, finger hovering over the trigger, just in case. I watched it for what felt like an eternity, waiting for the chest to rise, waiting for it to twitch. Nothing. After about 10 minutes of dead silence, I made a choice that I still regret. I decided to go down and check it out. I slung the rifle over my back, climbed down the wooden ladder from the tower, and slowly approached the spot in the field. I had my 1,911 drawn, safety off, and my tactical flashlight piercing the dark. My boots crunched loudly in the snow. When I got to where the body should have been, it was gone. I stopped dead in my tracks. There was a massive pool of thick black, viscous blood on the white snow. But nobody. No drag marks. Nothing. I looked around, frantically scanning the area with my flashlight beam, cutting through the trees. I couldn't see anything. Then, I heard a noise behind me. A low, raspy chuckle. I spun around, terror gripping my throat, and fired 3 shots into the darkness. The flashes lit up the empty trees. I heard something heavy and fast running away deep into the woods, breaking branches as it went. I didn't wait to see if it was coming back. I ran back to the outpost faster than I have ever run in my life. I slammed the heavy steel door shut and threw every deadbolt and lock I had. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner of the room, my back against the wall, with my M21 pointing at the door until the sun came up. The next morning, as soon as it was light, I called the owner. I told him I quit, effective immediately. I didn't tell him why. He offered me double, but I just said I couldn't do it anymore. I packed up my gear, threw it in my truck, and got the hell out of there, constantly checking my rearview mirror. I still have nightmares about that night. I wake up in a cold sweat, seeing that distorted face. That twisted smile. Those glowing red eyes looking up at me in the tower. I don't know what that thing was, but I know it's still out there. And worst of all, I know it knows who I am. Story 2, It Comes at Night, submitted by Hannah P. This happened about a year ago, but the terror of it feels like it just happened yesterday. Here's a little background about my neighborhood. My house and the others are all set in a circle. A perfect, manicured cul-de-sac where people just built modern homes, not knowing or caring what was ever there before. Which I later found out through some grim local history was built directly on top of a Native American burial ground. Of course, the developers just kept building. And we've all seen our fair share of horror movies where building on ancient sacred grounds is a huge mistake. I never thought I'd be living in one. Sometimes my closest friend Michelle and I will walk around the neighborhood. Usually at night because it's the only time she wasn't busy with work. We would walk the loop, talking about little things: work, boys, books, TV shows, anything that made us happy really. And that routine usually made us comfortable. It felt safe under the amber glow of the streetlights. We would always walk past a soccer field connected to the circle. A thick, dense wall of ancient trees surrounded the field on all sides. But if you walked through the field, cutting across the grass, there would be an old dirt path leading deep into the woods. Michelle and I were really curious about where it led one night, so we decided to check it out. I had my dog, C, with me. She's a small, fluffy white dog who thinks she's a pit bull, fearless and loud. We stepped off the grass and onto the dirt. As we walked down the path, the atmosphere changed immediately. The air got colder. It was the middle of summer, with sweltering heat just minutes before, so it should have been warm. But I could see my breath pluming in the flashlight beam. C stopped walking. She started growling at the trees, the hair on her back standing straight up. Ugh. I picked her up and held her close to my chest. She was trembling. "Maybe we should go back," Michelle said, her voice trembling just like the dog. "Yeah, let's go," I agreed, a knot forming in my stomach. We turned around and started walking back towards the safety of the soccer field. That's when we heard it. It sounded like a baby crying. A pathetic, mewling sound. It was coming from the deep woods to our right, hidden in the pitch black. "Did you hear that?" Michelle asked, gripping my arm. "Yeah," I whispered, terrified to make a sound. We froze, listening. The crying got louder, more insistent. And then, it changed. It didn't taper off, it warped. It started to sound like a laugh. A deep, guttural, demonic laugh that vibrated in the damp air. It was mocking us. We didn't say another word. We started running. We ran out of the dirt path, bursting onto the open grass of the soccer field. We didn't stop until we crossed the street, ran up my driveway, and got to my house. We burst inside, slammed the heavy oak door shut, and locked the deadbolt. We were out of breath, our chests heaving, terrified out of our minds. We went into the living room and collapsed on the couch, trying to process what just happened. C jumped out of my arms and ran straight to the front door. She started barking viciously, scratching at the wood. Barking implied by context. I felt sick. I slowly got up, walked to the large living room window, and pulled back the curtain just an inch. I looked out onto the street, and my blood ran cold. I saw a shadow standing on the sidewalk, right under the street lamp. It looked like a man, but the proportions were horrific. It was too tall. It had to be at least 8 feet tall, towering over the stop sign. It was just standing there perfectly still, staring directly at my house. "Hannah, what is it?" Michelle asked, coming up behind me, sensing my terror. "I don't know," I whispered, unable to look away. Then, the thing started moving. It walked towards the house, stepping onto my lawn. But it moved with these long, jerky, erratic movements. It didn't walk like a human. It moved more like a spider, its limbs snapping into place with sickening unnaturalness. It crossed the lawn in seconds. It came right up to the window and leaned down to look in. We were face to face, separated only by a pane of glass. It had no face. There were no eyes, no nose, and no mouth. Just a smooth, pale, fleshy surface where a face should be. Michelle screamed at the top of her lungs. The thing reacted. It slammed its massive, pale hand against the window. Boom. The glass didn't break, but the impact was so violent that the whole house physically shook. The force of the shockwave threw CIA across the room. She yelped as she hit the wall. I panicked. I saw the glass bending, cracking under the pressure, and I knew the lock wasn't going to hold. I lost my mind. I ran away from the window, grabbed Michelle, and pulled her toward the back of the house. "It's coming in. It's trying to kill us," I blubbered, crying hysterically. We grabbed C, ran to the back door, and bolted into the backyard, intending to jump the fence. But as we stood in the grass, trembling, the front of the house went silent. We waited 10 minutes, freezing in the summer air. Finally, we crept back inside through the back door. The living room was empty. The window was intact, though smeared with a greasy, pale residue where the hand had struck. C was just lying on the floor, panting and scared, her little nose twitching 1,000,000 times a second. Michelle was in shock. She tried to doubt my story and tried to say it was just a tall guy playing a prank. But then I began to describe the thing's face, how it had no features, how it looked like a blank canvas of flesh peering through the glass. Even she looked terrified, realizing a human couldn't look or move like that. She slept over that night. We pushed the couch against the front door, and C stayed right by our sides. We barely slept that night, jumping at every creak of the floorboards. But little did I know, it wouldn't be the end. I still have no idea what this thing was, or why it chose us. But ever since that night, my life has been a nightmare. I've been scratched in my sleep. I've been pushed down the stairs out of nowhere. I can't sleep in my own room due to an overwhelming, suffocating feeling of being watched from the dark corners. And it followed Michelle, too. She has had things violently thrown across her house when she's alone. She's found deep scratch marks on her walls, on her ceiling, and on shredded furniture. The fight isn't over. It attached itself to us. And it probably won't stop until we move far, far away, or we find a way to put an end to this. Story 3, Something Stalked Us Last Winter, submitted by Jay. I live in rural North Dakota, on the extreme outskirts of a small, quiet town. My house sits on about 20 acres of flat land, and it's surrounded by open fields that stretch to the horizon, dotted with small patches of dense trees. It's beautiful, but it's isolated. If something happens out here, nobody is coming to help you. It was late December, deep into the bitter cold of winter, and we had just gotten a fresh, thick layer of snow. The kind of snow that reflects the moonlight and makes the night look glowing and pale. It was around 11 p.m., and I was in my room playing video games with my headset on. My parents were already asleep down the hall. During a loading screen, I slipped one ear cup off. I heard my dog barking outside. Now, he's a big shepherd mix, and he barks at everything from deer crossing the property to coyotes howling miles away. So I didn't think much of it at first. Just another animal in the yard. But then, his aggressive barking suddenly changed. It turned into a high-pitched whimpering. Huh. A sound of absolute submission and fear. That got my attention immediately. I paused my game, took the headset completely off, and listened. The house was dead silent. Then, thud. I heard a loud, heavy thump against the side of the house. It wasn't downstairs. It sounded like it was right below my window. My room is on the second floor. Whatever hit the siding was high up. I got up, walked to the glass, and looked out the window. Despite the snow, it was pitch black outside near the base of the house where the shadows fell. I couldn't see anything immediately below. I grabbed my heavy maglite flashlight from my nightstand and shined the beam down into the yard. The first thing I saw was my dog. He was cowering by the back door, shaking violently, his tail tucked tight between his legs, desperately scratching at the wood to get inside. I scanned the yard with the harsh white light, moving past the dog, past the deck. And that's when I saw it. Standing near the edge of the trees about 50 yards away was a figure. It was impossibly tall and unnaturally thin. It was pale white, a sickly alabaster color that almost made it blend in perfectly with the snow around it. It had long, spindly arms that hung down past its knees, swaying slightly in the freezing wind. It wasn't moving towards the house. It was just standing there, stock still, staring right at the second floor, right at my window. I couldn't make out any facial features in the glare of the flashlight, just a pale, smooth oval. But even without eyes, I could feel its gaze burning into me. A cold, predatory intelligence. Panic flooded my system. I dropped the flashlight on my bed, ran downstairs taking the steps 2 at a time, and rushed to the back door. I unlocked it and threw it open. My dog bolted inside like he was on fire, nearly knocking me over, and ran straight under the kitchen table where he curled up into a ball, whining. I slammed the door shut, locked the deadbolt, and checked the chain. I ran back upstairs to my room, my heart hammering in my throat. I grabbed the flashlight, pressed my face to the glass, and looked out the window again. The beam cut through the dark, but the pale figure by the tree line was gone. Just empty snow and dark woods. I sat on the edge of my bed, gripping the flashlight. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination. A trick of the light reflecting off a snow-covered birch tree. Paranoia. But then, I heard a sound that made me stop breathing. I heard footsteps. Not in the yard. On the roof. They were heavy, slow footsteps, sinking into the snow covering the shingles. They were pacing. Back and forth, back and forth. directly above the ceiling of my room. I froze. My eyes darted to the ceiling, following the sound of the weight shifting above me. I didn't know what to do. I thought about running down the hall and waking my parents. But if I left the room, what if it found a way in? What if I was just scaring them over a raccoon? But raccoons don't weigh 200 pounds. The slow, deliberate footsteps continued for what felt like an hour. Step, drag, step. Testing the roof, waiting for me to come outside. And then, finally, they stopped. No sound of it climbing down. Just silence. I stayed awake all night, sitting in the dark, listening to every creak of the house, but I didn't hear anything else. The next morning, as soon as the sun was fully up, I went outside with a baseball bat to check for tracks. I walked to the tree line where I'd shined the light. There were strange footprints in the deep snow. They looked vaguely like large human footprints, but they were wrong. The toes were elongated, digging deep into the frost, and there were no arches, just flat, massive indentations. I followed them back toward the house. They led right up to the wall beneath my window. And there, scoring the vinyl siding of the house, were scratch marks. Deep, jagged gouges that went all the way through the paint and into the wood beneath. The marks were at least 12 feet off the ground. I haven't seen the pale figure since that night. I installed motion lights and cameras around the property, but the cameras never catch anything. Still, sometimes, on the coldest, darkest nights of winter, when the wind dies down and the house is dead silent, I still hear those heavy, slow footsteps pacing on the roof above my bed, waiting for me to look out the window one more time. If you have a story you would like to share, be sure to send it to truehauntinglog@gmail.com. We read every single submission. If these stories kept you awake, please leave a like and a comment down below. Let us know. What would you do if you heard footsteps on your roof? Don't forget to share this video with a friend and subscribe for more true horror. Thank you for listening, and lock your doors tonight.